Hi, this is Bob Brown. Welcome to my Facebook and YouTube channel. Today is Saturday, March 25th, 2017. I want to apologize. I made a really bad video. I had the screens all messed up, and the commentary is good, but the screens are all wonky. So I want to start over, and I'll leave the other video up, but we'll start over. So basically, I was going through a series of books here that I want to go through, and the most important one is Raymond William Baker's Islam Without Fear. Egypt and the New Islamists. Sorry. I can't say enough about this book. This is a must-read book. This is about, and let me read from the fly flap here. For the last several decades, an influential group of Egyptian scholars and public intellectuals has been having a profound effect in the Islamic world. I need to be your editor, Mr. Baker, because your editor didn't get that right. Raymond Baker offers a compelling portrait of these new Islamicists, Islamic scholars, lawyers, judges, and journalists who provide the moral and intellectual foundations for a more fully realized Islamic community open to the world and with the full rights of active citizenship for women and non-Muslims. So this is a template for the centrists of Islam. Now, my contention is, of this video, my contention that I'll be going through is that if you look at the works of Dr. Rubin from 1970, he did a book called The Angry Book. And in The Angry Book, he essentially is talking about how people have slush fund anger that builds up in their psyche, in their subconscious, in their conscious mind, what I would sometimes call the preconscious mind. And in this preconscious mind or subconscious mind, there's the preconscious, subconscious mind. I'll go through that a different story time. Imagine the frustration you can feel if you have a boss or a series of bosses that treat you bad, who belittle you, who don't like your ideas, and they're always putting you down. You're going to start building up a slush fund, and this slush fund creates these distortions in the psyche, and they can lash out at inappropriate moments. Like, for example, you're so frustrated with your job, and you come home and your cat, your dog has made a mess on the carpet, and you just explode inappropriately. That inappropriate, or what Dr. Rubin calls blatant blasting. Blatant blasting is a term. So you have the slush fund, you have blatant blasting. Blatant blasting is when you have this distortion of all this frustration, and it just goes into these strange distortions, and you just overreact, and you do odd things, and that's because of this massive slush fund of anger. And I don't have Rubin's book in front of me, and I apologize. So my contention is that then you become what Rubin calls a negaoholic. You can become addicted. Your mind becomes addicted to negative thoughts. You're just addicted to it. It's like being a downer all the time. You're addicted. Oh, that's bad. I heard bad news. And you get addicted to it. It's almost like you're addicted to, a drug or caffeine or candy, or you have a sexual addiction, or whatever your addiction process is, and you're getting addicted to that negative thinking. And then you try to assuage your conscience by, again, acting inappropriately. And this happens to a lot of people. Now, if you think about what happened to the Iraqi people, we have ill-informed CIA intelligence that tells President Bush II that there are weapons of mass destruction. There are uranium rods, there's yellow cake, and there's all kinds of things in there. And then you have Hans Blix, the Swedish weapon inspector, and his scientific team that are in there, and they're saying there's no evidence of mass destruction. I remember clearly Hans Blix saying there's no weapons of mass destruction, and he said you can't trust the Iraqi regime, but we have no evidence that they have nuclear or radiological weapons that they could use against the West, Israel, or our allies. And so the scientific data that Hans Blix presented was, it was extremely conclusive. It was backed with data. It was backed with observation. It was backed with, phenomenological observation on the ground. The CIA says, Mr. President, we have evidence to the contrary. And basically, in my opinion, the CIA said to George Bush, are you going to believe us, Mr. President, or your lying eyes, or the science? And Bush went with the CIA, and then off the United States went into Iraq, and we have a terrible, terrible consequence from that action. The UN estimates that maybe up to 1 million people died because of the consequence of that war. 1 million people of a country of 27 million people. How do you make up for that? I mean, there's 1 million people in the grave. How do you make up for that? Now, having said that, and we should pray every day for what happened there. Pray for ourselves, pray for the people that happened. It's just terribly sad. I'm really ashamed of what happened, what the United States did. I can't even believe the United States. I feel like I'm in a parallel world, honestly. So having said that, so now you're an individual in Iraq. Okay, your family has been killed. You just buried your children. Your wife had her leg blown off. You have all these problems. Your business has been destroyed. And I'm a business analyst. I'm a business scientist. And you're just sitting there on the curb, and there's just no hope. There's just no hope. You have no hope. And that slush fund of anger, that rage in your mind is built up. And along comes an ISIS insurgent and says, you know what? We can help you get back at what those people did. You know, the people that put those children of yours in the grave, that destroyed your business, that you spent your life building, who blew your wife's leg off. She'll never have children again. You'll probably never have sex with her again. She's just going to lay there and malinger and be a terrible burden on you and herself and everybody. You know all that anger you feel, sir? Yes. Come with us, and you can strike back. What are you going to do? What would I do? I'd get up and walk right behind that ISIS guy. I really would. Because I would look at what the West did to me with such rage that we can't even imagine it. So that's what happened to the Iraqi people. That's that slush fund of anger that got built up because of this ill-fated, wrong-headed invasion into Iraq. So we have to understand that, like in any relationship that's distorted or destroyed, or any divorce, there's two sides to this story. There's two sides. And that's the other side we don't talk about. We don't want to talk about this massive destruction of life and property and futures in Iraq, what happened with the U.S. government. We want to kind of just slough that off. So that's the slush fund anger I'm talking about. And that's why I think we have to support the centrists in Islam. We have to support the centrists in the West. So we cannot escape the responsibility to what happened to the Middle East. We cannot escape it. We can't run from it anymore. So let's look at another series of works here. You can't really study the Middle East in the West without knowing the works of Bernard Lewis. Bernard Lewis is a great scholar, and this book is From Babel to Dragomans. And I recommend all the work from Bernard Lewis to kind of understand the Middle East. And I think in a lot of ways Bernard Lewis's works show the Middle East and the West prior to the Iraq invasion. So it's important to see, or to level set, to see where our relationship was with Islam prior to the Iraq invasion, where it is now. So I recommend all the works of Bernard Lewis, and this book I'm recommending is From Babel to Dragomans. Now, there's a lot of fear against Islam, and we talked about Baker's book. So let's look at the history of Islam. Here's a great text, and this text, it may be hard to see, and I apologize because it has a shiny cover, The Algebra of Abul Kamil. So let's read briefly from here, from the fly flap of the book. This is by Martin Levy, and this is his translation. In the slow and painful evolution of modern mathematics, the Arabs hold a distinguished place, inheriting from the Babylonians a practical and concrete approach to the mathematics. They adapted and absorbed the more theoretical Greek outlook and a synthesis of abstract thought and practical demonstration, from which evolved modern scientific methodology. So this is just one aspect of the golden age of Islam that has really transformed the world. Now, so this series I'm on is about Negaoholics, Psychopaths, and the destruction of the world. So we have a breakdown of the open markets, of capitalism, of free markets. Free markets are a way to have peaceful coexistence. So what I'm trying to help you with is we don't need to have this multiculturalism. That is kind of a meaningless statement. Does that mean I'm a multiculturalist? Do I have all these cultures in my head? I can read and understand all these cultures, and I think you should. But that doesn't mean I'm going to become a multicultural being. I am a Westerner, and that's what I should be. But I should acknowledge that my culture is as valid as someone else's culture. So my contention is that we, and on both sides of this problem, are being manipulated by psychopaths. So if you become a negahoholic, and I would say I'm a negahoholic. I actually have a brain problem called a Charia 1 malformation back here. And I think, and I've done videos on that, but and I'm prone to depression, I'm prone to negative thinking, I'm addicted to negative thinking, and once you get into that line that you're addicted to negative thinking, it's my contention from an organizational, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a medical person, I don't pretend to be a psychologist or medical person, but from an organizational point of view, I see where when you have a lot of negative people, it's very easy for a psychopath to latch on. They can latch on to you. And as I say, psychopaths in some videos, they're not just running you, they're running 30, 40, 60 people to their means. And again, I advocate no violence against psychopath. I'm saying it's a medical condition. However, it's a condition you must understand. So like the person in Iraq whose he's buried his children, his wife's legs blown off, his business is destroyed, his life's been destroyed, and along comes a psychopath, and they got him. And those psychopaths, they don't need many, and they can control hundreds, if not thousands, and we're seeing that with ISIS. But let's not fool ourselves that we have them too. Okay? If you look at the invasion of Iraq, I think clearly we can say that psychopathy played a part in that, and we have to accept that. So scientifically looking at organizational distortions from psychopaths upon people who are negatively thought-controlled, negaoholics. I'm a negaoholic. You may be a negaoholic. I sure hope you're not. Then they can grab either side and they can tend against us. Now, you and I are sitting here thinking, what the hell's going on? And you can see it in businesses. I've been in businesses that things were going along great, and then all of a sudden, all these distortions and oddities and drama come out of nowhere. And I've said in other videos, that's the time to start looking around if we have a human malfunctioning. And if that human's malfunctioning, again, you can't really say, aha, that person's a psychopath, but you can start seeing the tendencies. And the tendencies usually are, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, when someone views another human being as prey, when a person views another group of people, a person, a family, a business, an organization, when they start viewing it as prey, predator-prey, and they start preying upon another group, for whatever reason, it's my contention with very little data, but I'll bet you money I'm right. But it's my contention that what you're dealing with here is you're dealing with a psychopath. And once you deal with that problem, you'll see exactly what's going on in the world around you. You'll understand. So I want people to understand this whole line of thought. So what we have is, in organizations, whether it's Islam or it's the Western civilization, you can have a constant barrage upon you of negative thought. And this negative thought will usually be also rained down on you, and you'll start hating yourself, but then eventually they'll weave in there a narrative towards hating some other group of people. It could be another business, it could be another department, it could be another co-worker, it could be a family member. I've seen this tear entire families apart, I've seen it tear divisions apart, organizations apart. That's probably a sign you're dealing with a psychopath, and it's probably a medical condition that we need to understand scientifically. And I'm advocating no violence against these people. They must be understood medically and scientifically. Now, once you understand that phenomena, what's going on, you can say to yourself, well, you know, you can say, am I being manipulated by the psychopath to have negative thoughts towards everybody? Now, in the case of the people in the Middle East, it's pretty easy. I mean, they've been bombed, there's drones, there's people dead everywhere, and the Western interventionism triggered this disaster, this tidal wave of disaster. So once you have that, I mean, it's very difficult not to be a negaoholic, and at that point, psychopaths take over. And if ISIS is not psychopaths par excellence, I don't know what is. So that's why I want people to start doing research. We need to start creating free markets. We need to allow people from different cultures to collaborate on businesses. To me, the answer is, my view of the world is pretty simplistic. I look at the world from the free market, democracy, and business. You know, that to me, that's the holy trinity right there. The free market, democracy, and business. Once you have that, you can have peaceful coexistence of all cultures and people. Because at the end of the day, I'll speak as a man, we want to be able to provide for our families, to have a good life, and become prosperous. That's what all people really want to do, right? You want to be a successful businessman. We all want to be Elon Musk and land rockets on Mars. And I think we should learn from people like Elon Musk, and we need to get out of this negaholism and start looking at another person from a different culture and say, you know, what if we collaborated on a business venture or an idea or a YouTube channel or on a new program we could write, because I'm a programmer and I'm a cyberneticist and I'm getting my doctorate in that. Why don't we do that? Versus let's just hate Islam and we hate terrorism and all this. Because at the end of the day, in my opinion, the terrorists and the jihadists that we're fighting, I mean, they were created by the West to a large part. Now, I'm not sitting here blaming the victim, but I'm saying there's an overarching phenomena that we need to take into account. So I would strongly recommend to start thinking about in your own life, you know, when you see these terrorist attacks, remember that person probably became such a negahoholic, and I'm not excusing this. I'm not excusing this. But they became such a negahoholic. They had such a, as Rubin calls it, that slush fund of anger that they just couldn't control it. And then they get under the influence of a psychopath, because the psychopath's probably manipulating these terror cells. And the psychopath's going to protect themselves, trust me. Psychopaths, if you look at the work of James Fallon, the neuroscientist that discovered he was a psychopath, you will discover very quickly that, in fact, what we're dealing with here is a psychopath manipulating maybe 10, 20, 30 people. Like I tell people, and you don't have to be a jihadist, you can just be people who are being manipulated. And when I talk to people that, and when I convince them, hey, you might be under the influence of a psychopath, and they're very vampiric, like a vampire, I said, you're not the only person they're running. They're running a lot of people. And they're doing a lot of things in a lot of different aspects of life. The extreme cases, they may be manipulating someone who's a negahoholic, depressed, has psychological problems. They may be manipulating them to go kill people, like we see in the London bombings, and the London truck killings, where the guy ran over people and killed them, and then stabbed the British police officer and went into Parliament. That's just one example. But we have got to start looking at this stuff scientifically, versus all this emotionalism on both the political spectrum. We got to take that out. That's why I keep recommending these types of books. You know, you've got to start looking at things. Islam is not a broken religion. I don't, that's not true. That's what one extreme spectrum wants you to understand. On the other hand, there are people who are in Islam who are negahoholics, depressed, they have psychological problems, that are being manipulated by psychopaths. That's undeniable. But that's true in the West too. Look what we did in Iraq with 1 million people killed. We created a perfect environment for psychopaths to thrive. We created the perfect petri dish for them to grow. So that's why I want people to understand what's going on. And the way, in my opinion, the way I would combat it is through the free market. The free market. Sorry, my spine is distorted here because, you know, it's a problem with the Chiari 1 malformation. But so you need to understand. So a couple more books to look at here. So from a Christian standpoint, but I'd recommend this, and I'll do a series on Sufism. So the Spiritual Exercises of St. Ignatius. This is a book that I use pretty much daily now on how to, you know, there's different exercises in here by St. Ignatius to really cleanse your mind of negativity. And, you know, and so I'll just read real briefly from this book. This was translated by Anthony Montola, PhD, and Robert W. Gleason. The Spiritual Exercises of St. Ignatius. St. Ignatius' Profound Precepts of Mystical Theology. And I studied mystical Christianity, mystical Islam, and mystical Buddhism. So on page 54 of this book, the meditation is made with the 3 powers of the soul, and the subject is the first, second, and third sins. It contains the preparatory prayer, 2 preludes, 3 principal points, and a colloquy. Prayer. The purpose of the preparatory prayer is to ask of God our Lord the grace that in all my intentions, actions, and works that may be directed purely to service praise of His divine majesty. Now that's real quick from the Spiritual Exercises of St. Ignatius. This is a book that was given to me many years ago, and I've kind of rediscovered it again, and I'm using this book daily. Now, this book if you read that and you read Sufism, the mystical Sufis of Islam, it'd be very closely aligned. Another book, Negotiation. This is a great book. The Japanese Negotiator, Subtly, Sagely, Blonde, Western Logic, Robert March. Remember, the West isn't everything. The United States population, I think we're only 6% of the world's population. So this is a good book on understand how to negotiate with a non-Western culture, which Islam is a non-Western culture. And this is also a good book for Islamic people to read, to understand how Japan and the West are different cultures, but we get along. I mean, there isn't really a more different culture than Japan and the United States, and yet we get along pretty well now. There was a terrible conflict in the Second World War, but since then, Japan and the United States, we've gotten along well. Our trade agreements, there's some imbalances, but they've been balanced out. We have a great relationship with Japan. We one of the best relationships in the world, and they're very different cultures. And I hold out the Japanese United States culture, our cooperation, our free markets, and we didn't take over Japan's culture, and they didn't take over ours. We saw each other as with mutual respect and dignity respect. The Japanese keep their culture, we keep our culture. Yet we negotiate together fantastic business opportunities. That's a model. This is a model for our relationship with the Middle East. The final book, I want to show psychologists that you should read some of Sigmund Freud and Totem and Taboo. Sigmund Freud most psychologists won't deal with Freud anymore, and I think people need to rediscover Freud's work, and Carl Jung and Adler and Rogers and all the psychologists that have kind of been thrown out, and because they don't really recognize psychology anymore. They think more things are brain disorders, and I would say that brain disorders are a big part of the problem of Islamic terror, and mental illness is a big problem of Islamic terror. And Negaholism from Dr. Rubin's book on the Angry Book and Slush Fund is a big problem with Islamic terror. But let's be under no illusions that the West has caused massive destructive force against Islam. Just imagine if you had a business and someone came in with a big, fork truck, started knocking shelves down, busting everything, smashing your windows, chasing your customers out of the door, turning over your tables. Then they come up to you and say, "How do you like what I just did for you?" I mean, that's exactly what the West did to a lot of Islam. And how many businesses, just speaking practically, how many businesses were destroyed in Syria and Iraq? I don't know. I'd love to talk to a Syrian or Iraqi business person and say, what happened to your business? What happened to your employees? And then talk to them and say, well, how did you rebuild? And I'll end on this point. If you're sitting in the Middle East or you're sitting in Youngstown, Ohio, and you have no hope, it's time to use the power of the free market to help yourself. Sit down, and even if you're afraid to write it down, allow yourself the freedom to think in your own mind what your new business could be. Could I team up with people in Jordan? Can I team up with people in Youngstown, Ohio, or Bloomington, Indiana, or Reno, Nevada, or Riyadh, or in Iraq or Iran or Jordan or Israel? We've got to get to a point of where we can, as business people, interconnect, negotiate, and create entrepreneurial wealth. Elon Musk, no matter who you are, Elon Musk should be a model. Elon Musk he's really one of my heroes. And what he's doing for SpaceX and the exploration of Mars and the Tesla company and PayPal, the guy is beyond a genius. I don't even know how to describe Elon Musk. So if Elon Musk can do it, all of us can do it. And that's why I point out that this book by Robert March, The Japanese Negotiator, we have to learn how to negotiate. Again, we're not here to turn in the Japanese or turn the Japanese into America, because the Japanese are proud of their own culture and they keep their own culture. So should the Middle East. The Middle East should be allowed to keep its own culture. So should the Western Europe. You should be allowed to keep your culture, but you should negotiate great trade deals. And I think these trade deals aren't done by government agencies. They're done by people like you and me. The free market, I should be allowed to talk to someone in Jordan and say, hey, let's write a new product for the Apple that does XYZ money and provide great service for our customers. So this is the model. The American Japanese, I highly, highly recommend Islamicists. This is a must read. Islam's national, scientific, balanced, historical. I showed you how this, will help create, the basis of all methodology in the world today. They did this 100 years ago. We looked at all the work. Oops, I'm gonna have a little life. I recommend having a spiritual dimension. If you're a spiritual dimension in life, Negaoholic. So I recommend for Christians to look at this. Later, I'll do Sufi myth study. I studied the Christian mystics, so I don't know where it cut out later. I got to get a better setup on this crazy hodgepodge you got here. I got toys and everything. It's just a mess in here. I'm decorating the whole house. The Japanese negotiation and cross-pollination between the cultures, production system, and how they've crossed between